Hi everyone, my name is Katie and today I'm going to be demonstrating this super easy beginner-friendly gouache painting tutorial on how I made these blue flowers. So for this painting, I'm going to be using my 50 set HIMI gouache jelly paints and my Artist Loft professional grade acid-free watercolor paper. So the first thing I'm going to be doing for this painting is I'm taking what closest resembles a raw umber on my paint palette and the darkest green I have, and I'm mixing them together using a little bit of water on my brush just to get the paint activated, but I'm not using that much. I want my background to be really thick so when it dries, it's not transparent. That's the really nice thing about gouache is they're super layerable, but you want to make sure that you're adding the amount of water to the effect that you have desired. So for my background, I want it to be super opaque and I want to do it in one layer, so I am pretty much scooping the paint out of my palette to get this background color. So as you can see, I'm already demonstrating how to paint the leaves. It was the longest process in this painting and I didn't want the background painting to be too much of the beginning of the video because it's just painting a solid color. But off camera, I let the background color dry, and then once it is dry, I'm going in, I'm mixing a mid-tone green. If I could go back, I would have added a little bit more red. I think it's a little bit too bright. Essentially what I'm trying to do here, and I also find this to be the most difficult part of painting realistic flowers, is I'm trying to imagine that I'm looking down at the ground from like a bird's eye view. And grass, if you're looking down straight at the ground, it grows out in all different directions in all these different patches. So you want to make sure that you're not, even though this is a vertical painting, you're not viewing it as looking straight at it. Because if you have your grass too much in one direction or going like upwards too much, it's not going to look realistic. The biggest tip I have for this entire painting process is to have a lot of unique shapes and unique directions. You don't want anything in your painting to be too uniform or else it kind of throws off the realism of it. So basically I'm going in with different shades of greens and browns and I'm adding leaves and sticks and little bushes. Basically I'm trying to mimic what looking a bird's eye view of the ground is. The most important thing I'm doing here is I'm doing my leaves and my grass all in different directions, and I'm continuing to build layers with different shades and different colors so you have those highlights and shadows in the painting. So now that I have this layer of darker leaves that are presumably closer to the ground and lighter leaves that are closer to the viewer and hitting the sun, I want to go back into those leaves on top and add a little bit more detail. I kind of was using my brush just to make little blobs, like the general shape of a leaf. And now that I have those shapes, I'm taking my lightest highlight color and adding a bit of texture to the leaves, like a line in the middle or vine shapes that spring out in the leaves. And I'm adding some highlights to half the leaf so it looks like certain spots are hitting the sun more. This step is optional, but it does add more realism to the overall piece. Once you're happy with the result of your leaves and bushes and grass, I'm gonna let that dry, and as you can see, I've already started painting the flowers at this point in the video. And essentially, I am mixing a darker blue to mimic the flowers that are lower to the ground, and then I'm adding in a little bit of flowers. You want to make sure not to do too much at this step. I have a habit of doing too much often with my paintings. So you're trying to keep it minimal, be very purposeful with where you put the flowers, and then once you have some of the darker shades, you can go on with the mid-tone and blue, and then finally a light tone blue. Another tip to make your flowers more realistic is flowers grow on bushes. So you're gonna find them in clusters almost, instead of if you were painting like a bouquet of flowers. So for this painting, I used my lightest blue because I was looking at it and I realized that I also made the flowers too uniform and like too symmetrical. So I decided to use my lightest tone for the flowers, so the flowers that are gonna be closest to the sun and closest to you, to paint over the midtones and the shadows that I've already painted for the flowers. Because if you're looking at a bush, it makes the most sense for your highlights, your flowers that are closest to the viewer. They're gonna be covering partially the flowers, your darker flowers that are representing the ones that are in the shade, because if they weren't, then they wouldn't be in the shade, obviously. So once I'm happy with how my clusters of flowers looks, I'm gonna let that dry and I'm going in, I'm taking my yellow ochre and my raw umber on my palette, and I'm mixing them together to add the brown center to the flower. You want to make sure, similarly to how you had your darker blues, your mid-tone blues, and your highlighted blues for the shadows, you want to do the same thing for the center of your flower. You don't want to have the same brown or the same yellow that you're using for your flowers in the shade as you're using for your flowers in the sun. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and let me know what you want to see in the future. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.